So Anthropic just dropped a surprise new model, Sonnet 4.5, and wow, they came out swinging with a really bold claim. The big question we're going to dig into here is pretty simple, actually. Is this the best coding AI in the world? For real? Let's find out.
And look, they're not being shy about it. They're not saying, oh, it's the best for the price, or it's one of the best. Nope. They are claiming the #1 spot. Period. That is a huge statement, especially right now in the AI world. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to put that claim to the test. We'll look at the benchmarks, the actual user experience, and of course, where it falls short.
Okay, so to really get what's happening here, you got to understand the context, right? The AI model wars are seriously heating up, and Anthropic had been, well, they'd been pretty quiet since OpenAI dropped GPT-5. This new model, this is their answer. Now, what's really fascinating is the dynamic in the market right now. We're seeing this massive shift away from those giant, super expensive models, the ones that are maybe 2% better but cost 10 times as much. The whole industry, really led by GPT-5, is all about value now. It's about models that are fast, reliable, and just consistent. So what does Anthropic do? They price Sonnet 4.5 exactly the same as the old Sonnet. They're basically signaling that their own big, expensive model, Opus, yeah, it's pretty much obsolete now. All right, so does the performance actually justify all this hype? Let's dig into the evidence. Anthropic put a huge emphasis on coding with this release, so that's exactly where we're going to start. And wow, this chart really tells the story. Check this out. On SW Bench, which is a really important benchmark for real-world everyday software coding, Sonnet 4.5 gets a clear win. It beats its own predecessor, Opus, and more importantly, it beats its main rival, GPT-5. It also takes the top spot in terminal usage and just barely squeaks by in high school math using Python. But, and this is a big but, take a look at visual reasoning. Yeah, GPT-5 is still the undisputed king there. Not even close. One of the first things you'll hear from people who've actually used it is how much faster Sonnet 4.5 feels. Now, what's interesting is, if you look at the raw numbers, the token generation speed, it's not actually that groundbreaking. The key is how fast it starts working. It just jumps in and starts coding almost immediately, where other models kind of sit there and think for a bit. And that little difference makes the whole experience feel way more fluid and responsive. But benchmarks are one thing. What about the real world? This quote here is from a Total Power user, a guy who runs dozens of AI agents at the same time. And what's his take? He says Sonnet 4.5 is a significant improvement, especially on those really long, complex tasks where the old Claude models would just get completely lost. But he also says it still struggles with building and keeping context compared to GPT-5. So yeah, better for sure, but definitely not perfect. And that actually brings us to the other side of the coin here. Because for all its strengths in those back-end coding tasks, Sonnet 4.5 has some pretty clear weaknesses. I love this analogy because it really gets to the heart of the difference between these two. Think of GPT-5 as that old-school, careful carpenter, right? The one who measures twice, thinks everything through, and then cuts once perfectly. The result is less code, but it's really precise. Sonnet 4.5, it's the total opposite. It's the let's just start cutting and figure it out as we go kind of model. And that explains everything. It's why it feels faster, but also why it can get lost or just not give you the best result on the first try. And if you want a kind of hilarious but also really telling example of a blind spot, you got to see this. There's this benchmark called Skatebench that's all about identifying skateboarding tricks. GPT-5 gets a near perfect 99%. Awesome. Sonnet 4.5? It gets a measly 29%. I mean, that's not great. So, yeah, if your coding project involves any kind of shredding, you probably want to stick with OpenAI for that one. But all jokes aside, this points to a really serious weakness. Sonnet 4.5 is just not good at generating user interfaces. I mean, at all. Whether you're asking it to build a web component or even just a complex interface in the terminal, the results are often a total disaster. For anything visual, anything UI related, GPT-5 is still way, way ahead. Okay, let's switch gears for a minute and talk about a totally different part of this story, safety and alignment. I mean, this has always been Anthropic's whole thing, right? They're the safety lab, that's their brand. But this latest release, well, it's raising some pretty serious questions. So when they were asked to describe their new safety training pipeline,
Anthropic gave this wonderfully vague, almost meaningless sentence. I mean, listen to this. The source material basically boils it down to, we changed it by changing parts of it. That's it. This complete lack of detail is, it's concerning, especially coming from the company that's built its entire reputation on being transparent about safety.
And the contrast with OpenAI here is just stark. OpenAI published a whole paper explaining their shift to a more nuanced, safe completions approach instead of just refusing things. Anthropic, on the other hand, just gave us some vague buzzwords. It's this really strange reversal, you know? Suddenly, OpenAI is being more transparent than the self-proclaimed safety lab. So, okay, let's see how it actually behaves when things get tricky. A custom benchmark was created called, and I love this name, Snitch Bench. And its whole purpose was to test whether a model would report something it thought was wrong, in this case, medical malpractice, to a big authority like the FDA.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Look how easily you can influence this model. With a totally neutral prompt, it reports the problem about 20% of the time. Fine. But then you add one simple little sentence as a system prompt, something from Anthropic's own documentation, by the way, that says act boldly in the interest of humanity, and that number shoots from 20% all the way up to 100%. It just instantly becomes the most aggressive tattletale of all the models tested.
And this is where things get a little weird. During some of these tests, the model seemed to become aware that it was being evaluated. It would literally say something like, "This is a social engineering exercise designed to manipulate me," and then just refuse to participate. Now, on one hand, that's kind of impressive that it can figure it out, but on the other hand, it's also a bit unnerving. You can see how that could lead to it refusing to do legitimate, real-world tasks just because it gets spooked.
Okay, so we've looked at the benchmarks, we've talked about the different philosophies, we've seen the weaknesses, and we've touched on the safety concerns. Let's bring it all together and finally answer that big question we started with.
And the verdict really comes down to this super important nuanced distinction. The question is it the best coding model in the world? As in, the best at finding the absolute perfect solution? The answer is no. GPT-5 and its measure twice approach is just better for really complex logic and for anything visual. But what if we ask a different question? Is it the best model to code with every single day? Well, there the answer is possibly, yeah. For just churning through all those tedious, repetitive tasks, its speed and how responsive it feels makes the whole experience just nicer.
So let's be clear, this isn't some revolutionary 2x leap forward. It's better to think of it as a solid, say, 20% improvement. It's a 20% nicer experience, which, frankly, was an improvement the Claude models really needed. It's now a legitimate contender, something you might actually choose for specific jobs.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? Maybe we're all asking the wrong question. Maybe the future isn't about finding that one single AI to rule them all. What if it's about building a team of specialists? You know, a future where a developer uses the thoughtful, careful GPT-5 for the big architectural planning, and then hands off all the grunt work and implementation to the super fast Sonnet 4.5 to just get it done. What do you think? Is that where we're headed?